This week, Vice President J.D. Vance stunned leaders in Europe, questioning whether their values warranted defense by the United States.
At the 2025 inauguration of the President and Vice President of the United States, it was the younger generation who stole the show. First, there was Barron Trump with his charismatic energy, then there was 3-year-old Mirabelle Vance, Usha and J.D. Vance's daughter, who adorably captivated the audience as she sucked on her thumb. Although the couple have 3 children together, it's Mirabelle's unexpected transformation that has surprised them the most. What's this dramatic change? Is their little girl growing up too fast? Let's find out. Before they built their iconic family, Usha and J.D. were just 2 individuals who happened to cross paths. Here's their story. Usha and J.D. couldn't have been more different from each other even if they tried, as both individuals come from very distinct backgrounds. Growing up for J.D. was a tumultuous journey, thanks to his mother's struggle with addiction and the economic situation in his Ohio community. Although he was raised by his grandmother, things weren't particularly easy. In contrast, Usha Chilukuri was raised in a more affluent and stable household, with parents who were both successful in their careers. As the daughter of Indian immigrants who placed a strong emphasis on academic and professional achievements, Usha always knew she was meant to shoot for the stars. Her father was an IIT-trained mechanical engineer, while her mother was a marine biologist. This meant that the young California native had to live up to the high expectations that came with having high-achieving parents, and she did just that. But despite their vastly different upbringings, fate somehow managed to bring these 2 together, and they formed a connection that would change their lives forever. It all began at Yale Law School in 2009. At the time, they'd been tasked with collaborating on a significant writing project. Usha would later note that they were friends first. I mean, who wouldn't want to be friends with J.D.? But in true friends-to-lovers fashion, their connection grew, evolving into something that straddled the shores of friendship and love. In his 2016 memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. describes his initial feelings for Usha as overwhelming. Even while they were collaborating on the project, he'd begun to harbor these tiny feelings that eventually blossomed into something much deeper. He thought about her constantly, so much so that one friend described him as heartsick, and another said he had never seen him like that. The turning point in J.D. and Usha's relationship came when he learned the beautiful young woman was single. As soon as he was in the clear, he didn't hesitate to ask her out, kickstarting a relationship that gradually deepened over the years. But their love didn't always guarantee happy moments. Remember that J.D. and Usha had grown up in significantly different social circles, so it wasn't always easy for him to fit in no matter how hard his partner tried to help him adjust to unfamiliar environments. In fact, at some point, J.D.'s struggle with handling stress within their relationship put their bond to the test. According to him, there was once an incident where he had to storm out of a hotel room after a disappointing interview. Although he later offered a heartfelt apology, Usha calmly told him through her tears that it was never acceptable to run away. This is one of the many reasons J.D. credits his success to the support of his wife. But what do we know about her? J.D.'s rise in politics has been marked by many things: his best-selling memoir, his shifting political stance, and his close partnership with Donald Trump. But through it all, his biggest supporter has been his wife, Usha Chilukuri Vance. Their story began at Yale Law School in the early 2010s, where they first crossed paths while organizing a discussion group on the social decline of white America. Their intellectual connection soon turned personal, with J.D. affectionately referring to Usha as his Yale spirit guide. By 2014, a year after graduating, they were married, beginning a life together that would later be thrust into the national spotlight. Despite being relatively private about their home life, the couple has made several public appearances at key political events. During J.D.'s recent vice presidential campaign, Usha was a constant presence, traveling with him on the campaign trail and offering her insights as he prepared for debates. When Trump secured victory over Vice President Kamala Harris, Usha stood by her husband's side on stage, celebrating the win with their supporters. Usha is impressive in her own right. At Yale, she was deeply involved in academia, serving as the executive development editor of the Yale Law Journal and the managing editor of the Yale Journal of Law and Technology. She was also active in programs like the Supreme Court Advocacy Clinic, the Media Freedom and Information Access Clinic, and the Iraqi Refugee Assistance Project. Before law school, she had already built an outstanding academic career. Usha earned her bachelor's degree in history from Yale University before going on to the University of Cambridge, where she pursued an MPhil in early modern history as a Gates Cambridge scholar. Born and raised in California, Usha is the daughter of Indian immigrants and grew up in San Diego's suburbs. She attended Mt. Carmel High School in Rancho Penasquitos before setting off for Yale, the first step in what would become an accomplished legal career. After law school, Usha worked as a litigator at Munger, Tolles & Olson, splitting her time between the firm's San Francisco and Washington, D.C., offices from 2015 to 2017. She later clerked for some of the most powerful judges in the country, including Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr. of the U.S. Supreme Court, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, and Judge Amul Thapar. In 2019, she returned to Munger, Tolles & Olson, focusing on complex civil litigation and appeals across various sectors, including higher education, local government, entertainment, and semiconductor technology. However, once J.D. became Trump's running mate, Usha's career took a sharp turn. Shortly after the nomination was announced, her profile was quietly removed from the firm's website. Munger, Tolles & Olson confirmed her departure, stating, "Usha has been an excellent lawyer and colleague, and we thank her for her years of work and wish her the best in her future career." Usha herself issued a statement explaining her decision. "In light of today's news, I have resigned from my position at Munger, Tolles & Olson to focus on caring for our family. I am forever grateful for the opportunities I've had at Munger and for the excellent colleagues and friends I've worked with over the years." Throughout J.D.'s career, he has been vocal about the role Usha plays in his success. In a 2022 interview, he reflected on how she guided him through Yale. "She instinctively understood the questions I didn't even know to ask, and she always encouraged me to seek opportunities that I didn't know existed." He has often credited her as the steadying force in his life, once telling Megyn Kelly, "I'm one of those guys who really benefit from having a powerful female voice over his left shoulder saying, 'Don't do that, do that.'" As the political spotlight grew brighter, so did public curiosity about Usha. In July 2024, after J.D. was officially named Trump's running mate, she made an appearance with him at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. A month later, she sat down for her first solo interview with Fox News, discussing how she was adapting to life in the public eye. She also addressed some of J.D.'s more controversial past remarks, including his 2021 comment about America being run by childless cat ladies. She defended her husband's statement, saying, "The reality is, J.D. made a quip in service of making a point that he wanted to make that was substantive. What he was really saying is that it can be really hard to be a parent in this country, and sometimes our policies are designed in a way that makes it even harder." As J.D. steps into his role as vice president, Usha's influence on his career and personal life remains undeniable. Whether behind the scenes or in the public eye, she has been a constant presence, offering support, strategic insight, and a steady hand as her husband navigates the unpredictable world of American politics. A resilient partnership in life and politics. J.D. and Usha tied the knot in 2014, and ever since, their intercultural relationship has proven to be a strong foundation and a mutual learning ground for both of them. Usha once remarked that when J.D. met her, he approached their differences with curiosity and enthusiasm. He wanted to know everything about her, where she came from, and what her life had been like. In fact, although he's a meat and potatoes kind of guy, he adapted to her vegetarian diet and learned to cook Indian food for her mother. Just like that, before she knew it, he had become someone she could not imagine living without and an integral part of her family. While introducing J.D. at the Republican National Convention, Usha remarked, "That J.D. and I could meet, let alone fall in love and marry, is testament to this great country." She then went on to say that the J.D. she knew then is the same J.D. we see today, except for that beard, of course. And his goals in this new role are the same that he has pursued for our family, to keep people safe, to create opportunities, to build a better life, and to solve problems with an open mind. In her words, "It's safe to say that neither J.D. nor I expected to find ourselves in this position. But it's hard to imagine a more powerful example of the American dream." Their journey together has now led them to one of the most powerful positions in the country, as J.D., venture capitalist, author, and political outsider, has now stepped into the role of vice president. Before his successful election as VP, Usha reflected on the possibility of their family living under the relentless glare of the public eye, admitting, "I don't know that anyone is ever truly ready for that kind of scrutiny." She recalled how J.D.'s first campaign was a shock to their system, an experience unlike anything they had ever known. But it was an adventure. Though she wasn't eager to upend their lives, she made one thing clear: "I believe in J.D., and I really love him, so we'll just have to see where life takes us." And life has taken them straight into the heart of American politics. But how did this happen? The start of J.D.'s political career. J.D. Vance is no stranger to reinvention. The guy has changed his name several times and somehow shot his way up to the top of the political totem pole. But how did a guy from a poor town in Ohio become the vice president of one of the richest countries in the world? We've gone over J.D.'s early beginnings, but let's go a little deeper. J.D. grew up in poverty but defied the odds, making his way to Yale Law School before stepping into the elite circles of Silicon Valley. His life story became the foundation of a best-selling memoir, part personal journey, part conservative manifesto, that catapulted him into the public eye. A former Marine who served in Iraq as a military journalist, J.D. once spoke out against U.S. military interventions abroad. And while he once labeled himself a never Trump guy, he now holds the second most powerful job in the country as Trump's vice president and a devoted MAGA loyalist. His new role also positions him as a frontrunner for the 2028 presidential race when President Trump, due to constitutional limits, will be unable to run. At 40, J.D. is young, ambitious, and, as the old saying goes, just a heartbeat away from the presidency. But how did he get here? J.D. was raised by his grandparents, Mama, and Papa, whom he sympathetically portrayed in Hillbilly Elegy. Because his father was out of the picture, J.D. had a revolving cast of father figures, which made him change his surname several times. Thankfully, his grandmother was the light he needed to see the world clearly. It's why when he and Usha tied the knot, they took the last name of Vance to honor his maternal grandparents' family name, leading to his current name, James David Vance. His hometown, Middletown, Ohio, sits in the heart of the Rust Belt, but for J.D., home was more than just a struggling industrial town. It was tied to his family's deep roots in Appalachia. This vast, mountainous region stretches from the deep south up into the fringes of the Midwest and Northeast. It's a place known for its breathtaking landscapes, but also for its deep poverty, limited job opportunities, and ongoing struggles with illegal substances and violence. In Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. painted an intimate, sometimes unflinching portrait of the people he grew up with, family, friends, and neighbors whose lives were marked by hardship, poor choices, and cycles of struggle. While he was quick to call out outsiders for looking down on Appalachia's so-called hillbillies, he also took a tough, conservative stance on his own community. He described them as reckless spenders, overly reliant on government assistance, and unwilling to put in the hard work needed to climb out of poverty. I saw people reacting to bad circumstances in the worst way possible, he wrote, arguing that the region fostered a culture that encourages social decay instead of counteracting it. His bluntest take? The truth is hard, and the hardest truths for Hill people are the ones they must tell about themselves. By the time Hillbilly Elegy hit the shelves, J.D. had already pulled himself far from Middletown. He had served in the Marines, done a tour in Iraq, earned a degree from Ohio State, graduated from Yale Law School, and built a career as a venture capitalist in California. The book not only made him a best-selling author but also a go-to voice for explaining Trump's popularity among white working-class voters. And yet, back in 2016, J.D. had nothing but scathing words for Trump. He was, in his own words, a never Trump guy. His verdicts were blunt: "My God, what an idiot. I find him reprehensible." As he toured the country promoting his book, J.D. balanced conservative values with a deep concern for the working class, repeatedly criticizing Trump's divisive rhetoric. "This election is really having a negative effect, especially on the white working class," he said in October 2016. "It's giving people an excuse to blame someone else, Mexican immigrants, Chinese trade, Democratic elites, or whatever else." Ironically, 8 years later, he himself would be repeating those very same talking points, this time, as Trump's running mate. From venture capital to politics in 2017, during the early years of Trump's presidency, J.D. made his way back to Ohio after years on the coasts, still working in venture capital but with a growing interest in politics. With the success of Hillbilly Elegy, speculation swirled about whether he would leap into public office. That possibility became even more tangible when Ohio's Republican Senator Rob Portman announced he wouldn't seek re-election in 2020. At first, J.D.'s Senate campaign struggled to gain momentum. But then came a $10 million boost from Peter Thiel, his former boss, and a major Silicon Valley figure. That money injected new life into his bid, and alongside it came a noticeable shift in his rhetoric. The J.D. who once focused on the struggles and shortcomings of working-class Appalachians now spent more time railing against elites, Democrats, and the so-called woke agenda. His media appearances expanded beyond mainstream outlets to more hard-right platforms, and various conservative YouTube channels and podcasts. It was around this time that many of his most controversial remarks, clips that would later resurface during the 2024 presidential campaign, began to emerge. One of the most widely discussed came during an interview with then Fox News host Tucker Carlson, where J.D. declared that the U.S. was being run by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable in their own lives and the choices they've made, so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. The backlash was swift. Though he later admitted the comment was dumb, he stood by the broader argument, claiming America had become pathologically anti-child. But JD's biggest obstacle in Ohio's increasingly Republican political landscape wasn't his inflammatory rhetoric, it was his past criticism of Trump. As late as 2020, JD remained skeptical of Trump's presidency. In private messages, he allegedly lamented that Trump had thoroughly failed to deliver on his economic populism, accepting a disjointed China policy. He even predicted Trump would lose re-election. But once Joe Biden won, JD's stance changed. By the time he launched his Senate run, he had reversed course, apologizing for his earlier remarks and earning Trump's coveted endorsement. That backing helped him secure the Republican nomination and ultimately win his seat in Congress. His unwavering support for Trump soon paid off. As the then presidential candidate considered potential running mates for his 2024 bid, JD's name quickly rose to the top of the shortlist. Trump, however, kept his decision under wraps until the Republican National Convention in July, just days after surviving an assassination attempt. When JD was officially announced as Trump's vice presidential pick, the crowd in Milwaukee erupted. Stepping onto the convention floor, he looked almost awestruck at the outpouring of support. But once he hit the campaign trail, he wasted no time establishing himself as an attack dog, relentlessly targeting the opposition and sparring with reporters in combative Q&A sessions at rallies and on cable news. Despite his growing stature, JD continued to stir up controversy. Controversy on the campaign trail. JD's life and career haven't been without controversy. One of the most explosive moments came when he spread a baseless rumor about Haitian immigrants eating pets in Springfield, a city near his hometown in Ohio. The claim ignited outrage, but rather than back down, JD doubled down. During an interview, he defended his remarks, arguing that his real goal was to create stories so that the media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people. Pressed for evidence, he insisted that local constituents had shared the pet-eating allegations with him, though he never elaborated further. With each controversy, JD's role in the campaign became clearer. He had transformed from a political outsider skeptical of Trump into one of his most loyal and combative defenders. The man who once warned against scapegoating immigrants and blaming elites for working-class struggles was now echoing the very rhetoric he had once criticized. And in 2024, that transformation was complete, this time, as Trump's running mate and the vice president. JD as VP. After his inauguration as VP, JD stepped onto the world stage as vice president with a high-profile trip to Europe, speaking at an AI conference in France before heading to Germany for the Munich Security Conference. Back home, in the chaotic early weeks of Trump's second term, he threw his full support behind the president's efforts to shrink the government, even questioning whether U.S. judges had the authority to stand in the way. But despite his position, JD has found himself playing second fiddle to Trump's cost-cutting czar, Elon Musk, whom many pundits describe as the real power behind the throne. Still, he had a hand in helping Trump's cabinet nominees gain Senate approval, using his connections from his brief time in Congress. One of his first missteps, however, came when he suggested that not everyone involved in the January 6 Capitol riot would be automatically pardoned. The comment sparked outrage from the MAGA base, forcing JD to defend himself online by reminding critics that he had donated to a legal fund for the rioters. Ultimately, Trump went ahead and pardoned nearly 1,600 people tied to the attack. The episode highlighted the fine line JD must walk, supporting a president who speaks without a filter while also tempering his more extreme impulses. As for his future? When asked in February if he saw JD as his successor, Trump's response was blunt, "No. But he's very capable. It's too early, we're just starting." But so far, he has quickly carved out a defined role in the White House, demonstrating where the administration is most confident in deploying him at the start of President Trump's second term. One of his first major tasks is overseeing a deal to sell and save TikTok, the Chinese-owned social media giant facing a potential U.S. ban. Alongside National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, JD has been tapped to manage negotiations, according to sources familiar with the matter. On Capitol Hill, JD has positioned himself as Trump's key liaison in the Senate, where he previously served. He has already played a crucial role in securing committee votes for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's nominees for Health and Human Services Secretary and Director of National Intelligence, respectively. Recently, JD returned to Ohio, marking the second anniversary of the East Palestine train derailment. He reaffirmed the administration's commitment to completing cleanup efforts and defended Trump's tariff proposals on Mexico, Canada, and China. He also weighed in on a controversy involving a Department of Government Efficiency staffer who resigned after racist remarks surfaced. JD called for his reinstatement, a move later echoed by Elon Musk. Vice presidencies can be difficult to navigate, but Vance appears to be hitting his stride. In an interview, he described himself as an all-around player. One White House official even graded his performance so far as an A. In the long run, JD's loyalty and hard work could pay off. And even though the vice presidency is no guaranteed path to the top, he has something that can never be bought with money: family. Family life with Ewan, Vivek, and Mirabelle. JD always longed for a tight-knit family. Perhaps it was the fact that he never grew up in a nuclear family unit, but he wanted something of the sort in his future. When he met Usha, it was a no-brainer: this was the woman he would marry. And together, they would build their family. They welcomed their first child, Ewan, in June of 2017. Before their move to Washington, the family was very private, with the pair mostly choosing to keep their children out of the spotlight and rarely showing photos of their 3 kids. But here's what we do know about them. Upon first becoming parents in 2017, podcast host Megyn Kelly shared news of the birth on X, where she wrote, "Ewan Blaine Vance was born on June 4th, congratulations, JD and Usha. He's beautiful." JD was particularly excited to be a first-time father. In an interview later that year, he revealed that they discovered their firstborn's gender early in the pregnancy. According to Usha, they found out right away because there was no way he could wait. Their second and youngest son Vivek is 5 years old. He was born in February 2020. To celebrate his 4th birthday last year, he made a rare comment about his son while on the Senate floor. He said he was sad he couldn't be with his son for his birthday, but went on to read an extract of the Dr. Seuss book, "Oh, the Places You'll Go," as a tribute to him. This was the first rare peek into Vance's strong bond with his children and his tender, fatherly side. Finally, there's 3-year-old Mirabelle, the youngest child and only daughter, who was born in December 2021. Posting on Instagram at the time, the VP wrote, "We were blessed with an early Christmas present this year. Everyone, please meet Mirabelle Rose Vance, our first girl. Mama and baby are both doing great, and we're feeling very grateful this Christmas season." And it's Mirabelle's name on everyone's lips as she stole the spotlight during her father's inauguration as VP. Mirabelle steals the show on a crisp January morning. JD stood inside the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, his right hand raised as he took the oath of office to become the 50th Vice President of the United States. It was Monday, January 20th, a day of pageantry and tradition, yet what captured the nation's heart wasn't just the solemnity of the moment, it was his 3-year-old daughter, Mirabelle, stealing the show in the most toddler-like way possible. Clad in a tiny coat with her fingers covered in colorful bandages, Mirabelle sucked her thumb as her father was sworn in, oblivious to the weight of history unfolding around her. In reaction to the moment, social media soon lit up with comments like, "I think the whole country can come together and agree that JD Vance's daughter sucking her thumb with those kid bandages on her fingers is totally adorable." Another commenter quipped, "Covering yourself in band-aids just ahead of an important event? Iconic toddler move." Standing beside JD, his wife, Usha, carried their little girl while also holding the Bible for the swearing-in. Their 2 sons, Ewan and Vivek, stood proudly in matching blue suits, their faces a mix of excitement and seriousness. The family, often described as the modern face of conservatism, presented a picture of warmth and unity. Usha, always poised, looked elegant in a custom pink Oscar de la Renta cashmere coat with a scarf wrap, paired with a tea-length dress. Just 2 nights earlier, she had turned heads in a strapless velvet gown at the vice president's dinner, held at the National Gallery of Art. But beyond the fashion, this was a historic moment as Usha had just become the first Indian-American second lady. Recalling their journey, Usha spoke about her husband at the 2024 Republican National Convention, giving the country a glimpse into the man behind the politics. JD was the most determined person I knew, with one overriding ambition: to become a husband and a father, and to build the kind of tight-knit family that he had longed for as a child, she said. As the inauguration festivities unfolded, it was clear that this was more than just the start of a vice presidency. It was the beginning of a new chapter for the Vance family, one that had already captivated America's attention. Did you also find Mirabelle's moment in the spotlight cute? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. To enjoy more exciting videos, click play on the video on your screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when a new video drops.